wind power just beat coal power in U.S. in energy output. So Daniel,
sounds like the sky needs some freedom.
what's going on with the wind?
So we have a tipping point that has just happened. They are predicting that in April, which just happened, that wind power production in the U.S. is going, or the renewable energy, I should say, which is wind, solar, geothermal, hydro, is going to produce more electricity than coal is for the first time ever. And it is happening at an increasing pace. And we know from what the Trump administration has already done early on in their administration, they've already set back wind and other solar by just killing their subsidies by an additional 2 years. But even with all these subsidies removed and nothing there, and the standard fossil fuel companies getting all of them, wind and solar have gotten so cheap that everyone is converting over, not because they're magnanimous people that care about the environment, but because capitalism is working in the favor of it's cheaper and more efficient. So in this case, natural gas has obviously just gone nuts because of all the new mining for tar sands that we've done, and obviously natural gas in general. 5 years ago, this would have never happened, said one of the people that were researching this. Even a decade ago, I remember when I was a kid, and you look at how much renewables made up the energy generation for the U.S., it was like a little bit, 1 to 3% of the power. I'm sure a lot of it was from dams at that point. And now, things are changing. Coal power produces... is expected to generate 420 gigawatts of power month per month. At the same time this is happening, coal power plants are getting old and shutting down because they have their own life expectancy. And I want to point out to everyone, coal power plants are more radioactive than any other form of energy generation because of the heavy metals that are in the coal. Just putting that out there. So if you're actually near a coal power plant, you're getting radiation to some degree. Far more than almost anything else, except if a nuclear power melts down, but it's different. Coal has gone from, in 2010, representing coal, of course, being the most polluting, one of the least energy intense fossil fuels, went from producing 45% of the U.S.'s power in 2010 to 28% in 2018, and they're expecting it to be 24% by 2020. So that's big. I mean, natural gas is really terrible for a huge host of reasons, but it's worse than radioactive coal, which is just soot that goes into the air with old machinery. So coal's going away. That's basically what it says. I'm sure Trump wasn't that happy. I'm sure the miners that voted for Trump weren't that happy, but a few billion more people will not die over the next couple decades, so I'm sure that's fine. So the costs of wind and solar continue to drop. They've dropped by 74%. I don't have a data over what period that is, but they've dropped 74% over a period. And now, like I said, they're getting to the point where it's cheaper to build solar panels. It's cheaper to build wind turbines than it is to build new coal plants or similar. The only real thing that's competing, and not completely, is natural gas.
Well, what about the wind cancer, according to Trump?
It's terrible. I know. We gotta get some people working on that. And again, they have been working on retiring a lot of plants, and they did make a caveat that I want to read in this, that this is happening during the spring, and during the spring, many coal plants go down for maintenance, and it's a lot better for wind and hydro because of melting snow and wind. So, guys.
Yeah, I think there's a strong case to be made for the Green New Deal here. I think when a lot of sort of right-wingers, your Trump types, will come out and say, but what about the coal miners in West Virginia? They need jobs. And it's like, right, they need jobs. They don't need jobs in the coal industry. That seems like a viable place to build out renewable infrastructure and renewable industries and allow these people to maintain jobs so that they can support themselves, and we can transition off of fossil fuels.
You know what's actually really good for the people in that area? hemp farming is actually really good hemp farming conditions. In that area.
There's also another thing to take away from coal, from coal workers as well. It's like now they have these industrial machines that can do the job of 100 men. And it really takes either 12 men or 2 men to operate. I don't know the exact number of men it would take to operate these heavy machines that could do a job of 100 people. But I mean, automation's taken over. And, Andrew Yang has basically said on the record that, automation is taking over, AI is taking over, and it's doing the jobs that normally you'd have people doing. And you're not, what's more cost effective? Sending a bunch of guys down the mine that could collapse on them, or have a machine do it, and there's no risk to human cost. And not to mention, coal is, a lot of these industries that especially the coal industry, especially in certain parts of the states, they are dying down.
But what if we just keep it in the ground?
Yeah,
just keep it in the ground.
That's the other point that I think it's good to get to, is that coal itself, even with that automation happening, it's still not. It's like they've gone through all the easy. So just like in the U.S. with oil, they've already gone through all the easy access oil in Texas in the early part of the century. They've already gone through all the easy access coal. Remember, coal is just trees that existed 300 million years ago, before there was any organism alive that could break down cellulose. Coal can't be produced anymore because things can break down cellulose, such as fungus and what have you. But before that happened, it was just forests that would just die on top of other trees, and then so you would have, over a million years, just half a
fossilized
mile,
wood,
half a mile of just trees that just get fossilized, and that's all coal is. So you're gonna run out of it eventually, and that's also what's happening. So it's harder to get coal. Even though they're automating the process down, it's still more expensive to extract it, and everything else is cheaper. I mean, the thing that knocked coal out first before renewables have been catching up was natural gas, because it just so happened that even though it's a little more difficult to get than coal, it just has more energy per unit, so it works out.
Well, and it's amazing that it's outpacing it in an economic arena, despite having institutional disadvantage, right? Oil and gas and petroleum companies get all sorts of subsidies from the U.S. government. There's all kinds of infrastructure behind it, and legislators will fight tooth and nail to keep any kind of legislation that gives additional sanctions to renewable energies, any kind of grants for renewable energies. We had some under Obama that came under some scrutiny, could have been done better, kind of things.
In the end, the almighty dollar in a capitalist system is going to win.
Right. So why don't we back that horse, the one that's winning, despite the fact that we're backing the other one?
But Trump made some deals to some coal people who gave him some money, so now we're here.
And not to mention, those same coal people also have connections and investments with the other fossil fuel industry, complexes that are out there. And the thing is, it's again, money in politics. This is the problem when we have influence of large lobby groups and corporations and
and the petrodollar.
And the mighty petrodollar.
And again, I'll say it again. Military-industrial complex needs to be converted to space mining. That's the only way that they can make more money. Fossil fuel production needs to be converted into green energy. And we're getting in that tilt point. We don't have a lot of time, but if we do things correctly and people get elected where they need to and people are backing them and the citizenry is active in the way they need to, again, the issues that we're dealing with, climate change and everything, we can mitigate in a very real and straightforward way that we have a good life for our kids and our grandkids. But because a lot of old men that have very old attitudes are not dead yet because they have the money to have very good health care, it's taking longer than it should.
Yeah. Yep. I think also we should take away from this too is that when we see the real impact, because let's even look at our toxic tour video that we did. Mm-hmm. We're seeing the consequences of relying on those fossil fuel industries and what they do to our environment. Yeah. And coal does the exact same thing too. And if we don't address it, a lot of our natural resources that we do take for granted will be gone forever.
I want to make do you want to make a point? Okay, I want to make super quick though. So this again goes to people that you guys talk to that complain, global warming 2%, what does that matter? Because I always hear that. Ask them what happens if your body temperature goes up by 2%. It's called a fever.
Yeah.
Pretty big deal, Paul.
Yeah, I always want to push members of the U.S. government to go for something like the Green New Deal. I always want to be pushing in that direction, and I am confronted with the idea that I bring up in almost every show, that for any given issue that you want to talk about, for any given thing that you want to reform within our system, you have to be okay and you have to understand that you're talking about reforming the whole system. So once you are able to push the United States government, hypothetically, if we're able to push our government to embrace renewable energy, embrace wind and solar and geothermal and hydro energy, then we're undermining our own petrodollar. We're undermining our military stance in the rest of the world, which means we need to draw back there. I'm in favor of that. And eventually we end up in a situation where we are no longer the monopolar hegemonic power of the world, because we now are operating off of this new energy source that doesn't specifically prop up our currency. So because everything is interconnected, that's why there's pushback on every front. That's why this is fighting tooth and nail just to get what we see as sort of the non-ecocidal movement going, right? People who want to save the planet. This is just one of those things.
We're doing a little bit of behind the scenes. Keep going.
Yeah, we're rolling around. This is just one of those things where it's really frustrating to see, like, well, this is the ethical and right path and the way that we should go, and also understand that all of the dominoes fall a little bit differently if we go that path, and starting to see clearly, well, that's why we're not going that path. And now I need to be okay with, boy, so much needs to change. Like, the system needs to be uprooted in order to get us to a place where we're doing right by the planet, doing right by the citizens of Earth, and doing right by other sovereign nations on the planet.
And I'm at the point where I'm so fed up with what fossil fuels have been doing for so many years that, I mean, I wouldn't be against, hey, everyone that's made a penny from fossil fuels, every dollar that you've earned from fossil fuel extraction, that's now the U.S. government's going towards the Green New Deal. You don't deserve it. And if we didn't do it that way, you just all go to jail for mass murder on a planetary scale for the actions that you've taken, and cover it up. Because if we really took the time to think about what's happening, who's done what when, fossil fuel companies have known that climate change was going to happen since the 70s. They covered it up, started a misinformation campaign based off of the tobacco industry using the exact same lawyers and the exact same marketing that have propped up this system for decades longer than it needed to, so that they can maintain their money, they can maintain their assets. And if we changed this all up in the 80s, it would have probably been done. We could have done it much slower, much more gradually, but we didn't. And now cities are going to be destroyed. People are going to die. Mass migration's going to happen, and that's the best case scenario. But dealing with this in a comprehensive way with a Green New Deal type of a program and this section of bills that goes with it, we'll be fine. We will survive. Humanity will still, it's crazy. It's like we don't do outright. I don't think that there's going to be a great world war in the same way that we saw in World War II. But a lot more damage is going to be done by fossil fuels and that. So again, take their money, put them in jail. They should help for all the lives that they've cost.
Absolutely.